Hello and welcome to the Business of Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Eric Rosenberg. Over the years, I've had the privilege of helping businesses in the meetings and event industry grow and succeed. And I'm excited to share that experience with you. If you feel alone and overwhelmed, and if you're looking to take your business to the next level, improve your strategy and sales, and connect with like-minded professionals, you are in the right place. I invite you to visit eventbusinessformula.com and join our community of event business owners dedicated to exponential growth. Now let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. And I'm delighted today to speak with an old friend, somebody who was recently, as last year, was appointed Managing Director Group Travel for the U.S. Travel Association. He's got a big role. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about his career. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Kevin Hinton. Kevin, how are you, my friend?
Eric, great to see you. Thanks very much for having me. Delighted to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about what you're doing, what US Travel is doing these days. And before, I'd like to talk about your journey. How did you get into our industry? And then obviously there's the legacy in your family, but also you've been the chair of MPI. You were the CEO of Site. You work with Alhai. You've been in all those major roles in this industry. So you have a fantastic career and an amazing view of what was going on. But first and foremost, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, well, great. It was MPI, I believe, that brought us together many, many years ago, Eric. So we'll touch on MPI a little bit, just the opportunities we had to do some work together there and obviously maintain a friendship many, many years later. But you're right, my dad was in the hotel business. And so I was a spoiled child traveler, at a young age. And then after college, I went to the Peace Corps. I lived in West Africa in a town of about 6,000 or 7,000 people. And I worked with a women's association there. And so that was my first kind of work with an association. We helped to establish basically a bank that we created within that association. These are women who were looking to better their families. And so they would together contribute to the association any money they could, small amounts of money, but we ultimately created a small kind of credit cooperative amongst them. And so that was my kind of first association work. And then I came back in the mid 90s back to Chicago, where I grown up and where I still live. And my first job was at the Chicago Hilton, which is this amazing institution on South Michigan Avenue in Chicago that has tremendous meeting space and tremendous history. And so from there, I've worked in an operations role and eventually got into the sales business that my dad started and kind of this group side of the travel industry and into the meetings and events, and pretty quickly joined MPI, was the president of the Chicago chapter. That was pretty transformational for me. It exposed me to a lot of the leaders at the time within MPI, and had the good fortune of being able to join the MPI board a year or two later, and then, served as international board chair, 2 years after you, I think it was, 2012, 2013. And that was really watershed for me in a lot of ways. One, it really tested my, leadership. It was a time of transition for the organization. And, the industry was recovering from the financial crisis, but still had, some challenges. So, through the different roles with associations, to kind of at that intersection of the events industry and association business is where I have fortunately found myself, and where I am now with US Travel, really focusing on, how can we be a catalyst for growth of group travel, of meetings, events of all kinds into and within the US. So I'm grateful for the many folks that have been part of this journey, and many who I count as friends today, and people that I count on for input, like yourself and many other past chairs of MPI. So feel grateful and also excited and hopeful, even in a time of uncertainty. I've learned just the power of our industry and the resilience and the importance of meeting face to face. So that's a little look back in time.
Now, we're going to talk about that uncertainty and whatnot. And I always say to people that I'm coaching, you should focus on what you can have an impact on. What you cannot control, it's part of the environment. Okay, so you have to deal with it. But for those who have been hibernating the last 20 years and have not opened a magazine or nothing in the last 10 years, what is US Travel Association doing, and what are you specifically doing for group travel?
Sure. The US Travel Association has a pretty simple mission. It's to increase travel into and within the United States. And we approach that through a couple of key priorities. One is, how do we establish travel as essential? Travel sometimes is seen as a nice to have or a luxury, but really it's a necessity. And how do we be that voice to champion the power of our industry? And then how can we help to improve the travel experience from point A to point B? That is in airports, in passenger screening, that is through federal organizations like the FAA that controls, air traffic control, the amount of planes that could be up in the sky. How can we be a voice for improving the travel experience, overall? And within group travel, so we break down the industry in 4 segments, group travel being one of those. Group travel it's meetings, it's events, it's group travel for sport, for entertainment, even leisure group, which is some people call tour and travel. So that's one kind of slice. That's where I'm focused on. But there's other, and that's about a $130 billion business, give or take, in the US every year. But then there's also international inbound travel. There's domestic leisure, which is really the biggest portion. And then there's business travel, which is related to group travel, but it's really individual business or transient business travel. And so the 2 things I'm focused on within group travel, to answer your question, Eric, is one is, how do we create more of a common set of facts that really help to define this group travel landscape? Because we want other people to have a better appreciation, understanding of our business. But if we don't use consistent ways in which we define and describe our business, and the statistics and data that we use to help people understand the scope of it, then we don't have the credibility that we need, and we kind of lose the audience. Because what we want to do is really help more people understand kind of the power of face-to-face. I know you've said and you've heard people say, when we meet, we change the world. And so this power of face-to-face, it's something that, many people believe because they've experienced it. And yet we're also highly vulnerable to people thinking, well, you know what? Maybe we don't need to do that meeting. Maybe we could save that money, as opposed to this thinking of, we can't do without that event. And how do we better describe the outcome, the impact of what happens when people meet face to face? And it's not a new concept, but it is something that we're really focused on, kind of taking a campaign approach to telling the story about the power of face-to-face and the impact that it's had on people's careers, on people's businesses, on industries, and ultimately how there have been, advancements that really affect all of us.
Well, you can take any business challenge, whether it's a relationship with customer, aligning people, training people, research in science. You can take any challenge. Down the road, you always have a face-to-face. And that's unfortunate, but people don't realize that. Now, when you're talking about helping the rest of the world outside of industry, because I think sometimes we're talking too much to our own belly button, as we say in French, instead of going to the outside world. What type of work can you do at US Travel and the group travel to inform people, to educate people? What you were talking about, data and methodology. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So there's a few key audiences. You're right. We've been in this position of, we're our own best cheerleaders, and we ought to continue to be cheerleaders for the value of face-to-face. Yet there's also this sense that people don't understand the work that we do. And so the audiences that we're focused on are business leaders, people that make decisions about spending and investing, and how do we reach them in ways and speak a language that they speak, as opposed to the language that we speak about meetings and events. Certainly media overall, business media, how do we have a better understanding from a business media standpoint, and kind of helping them help us tell our story to folks that aren't in the industry. It's always more powerful. It's people outside of the industry talking about the power of the industry. And then as well, policymakers. So certainly elected officials in this country and in Washington, D.C., but not just at the federal level, but those are the primary audiences. And so it takes some different kind of messaging and tactics and access to reach those folks, to have them understand it. I would say policymakers are probably the ones who need the least convincing. They do their work by coming together. So, and even in this environment where there's been this evaluation of government employee travel. It's not been an indictment of meeting face-to-face or travel. It's simply been a look at, are there ways to save? Are there good justifications for federal employees traveling to conferences? And I think for us in the industry, sometimes have misinterpreted that as they're coming after our industry, but that's not it. It really is a look at how do we reduce the size of the federal government in the United States. And one of that is to take a look at making sure that there's a better justification for federal employee travel. So this is a job that will never be done, Eric. We're not reaching a point where like, okay, everybody's got it now. We can stop talking about the value of face-to-face and stop using these examples to help people understand why it's so important. If they want to make something significant happen, at some point it's going to require them coming together with other folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it remind me of when I had my corporate events agency. I would ask a sales director of prospect companies, why do you do a sales meeting? And too often I had as an answer was, oh, because we do it every year. And I'm thinking, like, oh my God, how are they going to justify that? So if you understand the why, and then you can put the measurement in place for sure. Now, you're in a position where obviously at the federal level, it's changing every 4 years or every 2 years, and that you have to re-explain everything. So that I get it's never going to be done. What can you say about the type of program you have, the efforts that are being made on behalf of our industry when it comes to explaining what we do and explaining the importance of the industry?
Sure. So we work every day with the administration and with members of Congress to help them make decisions that ultimately support travel, support face-to-face meetings. We had a day of meetings on Capitol Hill with members of Congress back in early April, almost the entire Senate, about half the House of Representatives. And the reality is we have a lot of friends and allies there, but we can't assume that they know our business. They are responsible for having an understanding or at least being informed about a variety of different industries. And so we need to be able to share with them what it is that we need from them. And a lot of it does relate to the passenger experience and things like reducing visa wait times. That's a big issue for meeting attendees and speakers as well. So how can we bring that issue to the administration and to members of Congress to ultimately have greater capacity to process visas? I mean, really, that's kind of the biggest barrier. After COVID, we haven't built back the capacity in many areas. And so we're seeing extraordinarily high visa wait times in certain countries. Our goal is to get it to 30 days in every country. And so that's a big area. Also looking at some of the ways in which we're screening passengers. We're still taking off our shoes and emptying water bottles in the United States. That's not the case in other countries. There are other more advanced technologies, biometrics and other things that can make it less of a hassle, to go through security. And for some people, they just don't want to deal with that. And that may be a barrier. I mean, cost is perhaps a barrier as well, but really the experience. How do we focus on, taking some of the friction out of the system? And that's a lot of what we're talking about with our, elected officials about how they can help us help this industry grow.
Yeah. As you were talking about speeding up the process, not the visa, but passing custom. I recently went to Brussels to visit with my mom, and I used my US passport. And it took me, I think, an hour 30 to wait to pass so they can check the passport. And then I came back via New York, and then I came back also recently via Miami. You just go and take a picture, global entry, boom, just walk. Yep. It's phenomenal. But I know that this is a very important point because we have the Olympic Games coming. We have a FIFA World Cup coming.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the conversation that is taking place now to somehow ease the process of people that are going to visit.
Yeah, so we did a year-long study, what we called a commission on seamless and secure travel. And what came out of that were key recommendations. And the first one was to establish a presidential task force for the FIFA World Cup that's going to be here next summer. And you might have seen a couple weeks ago, there was a first meeting of this task force that took place with the president, the vice president, other members of the cabinet. Our CEO was there. And so to us, having this level of coordination and communication and collaboration amongst the different agencies that ultimately have an impact on travel in this country, it's giving us this opportunity to talk about things like showcasing America's greatness or the golden age of travel, and speaking in language that really resonates with this current leadership around their desires to do just that, to really showcase the great things about the U.S. And there are about just fewer than a dozen host cities that are going to have these games and matches, I should say. But there's an opportunity for those who come in to travel to really visit well beyond just the host cities. And so really focusing on how do we utilize this moment in time and prepare for it next year to ensure that we calculate about 40 million visitors for these different games, for the Olympics and for the World Cup. $100 billion in incremental spending. We need to get ready for that. And we're not quite ready there in terms of really being able to say we're able to handle this kind of increased capacity. And so it's giving us a chance to really have a not just a conversation, but we're seeing action taken to address some of these honestly longstanding problems and barriers for travel.
And then we're gonna have also the 250th anniversary.
Yeah. I mean, it's an exciting time. 100 years of Route 66 next year, and so
I didn't know
being
that.
able to kind of celebrate that's really in the middle of the country. And so how do we continue to showcase not just the major metropolitan destinations, which are amazing, but also kind of getting well into the country, our national parks, and really showcasing throughout the country. And so there's a lot of excitement about what's coming up. In fact, the World Cup kind of club matches start this summer. The Ryder Cup is here this year. And so sports is really kind of exploding in many ways. And it is that intersection of kind of, there's a group element to that, but there's also, these are highly global audiences that we're looking to, bring here for these games and in these matches. And, hopefully they'll come back for other reasons too.
There was a time when I was still living in Belgium where we will define soccer as a game where 22 people run after a ball, and at the end, Germany wins.
Yeah.
So we'll see next year.
Yeah, in the U.S., I mean, clearly in other parts of the world, football or soccer has been a sport that's had just tremendous fan bases, but it's grown here quite a lot. So it's an exciting time to see, to have this come here next year and be able to tap into the growth that's happened here as well as in other parts of the world.
Well, not everybody can have Messi in their city, right? Part of your responsibility is also increasing travel within the US. And you were telling me that something that I didn't think about, but the impact of youth travel and leagues travel. That's extremely important for cities when you have the cheerleaders competition, the volleyball competition. How much does that represent for the economy here?
Yeah, it's growing, Eric. My daughters are a little bit beyond that. They're just out of high school and in college. And so I feel like we missed that a little bit, but I see slightly younger kids where there's a tremendous amount of these kind of traveling teams and these leagues where they go. I just was talking with somebody with a major convention center, and they said they just had 54 volleyball nets set up in the convention center. They had 9,000 room nights, for one weekend, came in at a time where that city needed the business, right? And so I think it's getting the attention of a lot of folks that haven't really seen this as part of their business mix or part of their kind of group strategy. Some destinations have been focused on this for a while. And so, what we want to do is just help to share some of the knowledge and insights about this kind of burgeoning part of the industry so that more destinations are able to, make informed decisions about whether or not it, makes sense for them. And also, how do we help those, whether it's parents or agencies that are looking for destinations, how do we make that marketplace just a little bit more accessible, maybe make the booking process a little bit more transparent so that this will continue to grow over time? That's where we see the opportunities. We're excited about kind of continuing to be a champion for this. It's not new, but it has been growing quite a bit over the last few years.
Awesome. Now, assuming I'm a small business owner, nobody does it alone, and I don't have much time to do something else than building my business, running the project. How, as a business owner in our industry, can I help US Travel Association in the work you're doing?
Well, I think that we talked about it a little bit is ensuring that we are championing the importance of meeting face to face. We talked about sometimes meetings are held when there's not a clear purpose for that meeting, or the purpose or the goal is, well, we did it last year, we've done this before. That just increases our vulnerability as an industry when there's not a clear business purpose clear value proposition in this environment right now where there's scrutiny, not just at the federal government level, but I think all organizations are taking a look at why are we doing what we're doing? And that's events fall right into that. And oftentimes there's a very compelling reason. I can't say for every meeting, because I think you and I both went to meetings before where we're like, that wasn't a great experience. That wasn't a great meeting. So I can't say all meetings should continue, but what we need to really focus in on is what's the purpose? What's the impact? How do we measure that? It doesn't always have to be quantitative. Oftentimes it's qualitative, but really making sure that we know in this country, in the US, we're part of a $130 billion industry that fuels over 600,000 jobs across the country. How do we keep ourselves armed with statistics so when people make comments that may not be accurate about our business?
Absolutely. You know what would be helpful, and maybe it's existing and it's my bad not knowing it, is like some 10 speaking points like linked to data that would be helpful. For instance, you say it's a $130 billion industry. I've heard that it's a 1.4 trillion economic impact.
Globally, it is. You're right. So globally, it is, I think it's 1.6 was the latest figure that the Events Industry Council and other organizations got together to do. It is, so that globally, I think it's 27.5 million jobs around the world. So this is a massive global industry. Within the US, that number, and it's something that we need to continue to measure and evaluate. But you're right. Making sure that we've got these, when we're talking about a figure, what does it relate to and how is that measured? So people have the ability to understand, that makes sense. I understand it, as opposed to that doesn't make sense to me. And then they question it and then we kind of lose our credibility. So that is something we're working on. So we have a little bit better of a kind of narrative that we can provide so that people have kind of those key talking points to use almost regardless of what we're talking about.
And you say how many jobs that it represent in the US?
In the US, it's at least 620,000 direct jobs. As you know, when you bring a meeting to a destination, there's clearly the direct jobs, which is hotels and restaurants and airlines, and then there's a lot of indirect jobs that get impacted, right? Whether that's local retail, that's taxi drivers, that's spending on the local transportation. So, but 620,000 direct jobs in the US supported by meetings.
Amazing. So let's assume that in 1 year, we get together with a bottle of champagne.
Great.
What are we going to celebrate?
Well, we're going to celebrate that we are reaching this moment in time where the U.S. is about to kind of open its doors for the World Cup matches. And people are excited to come here. People are coming from all over the world. There's a genuine, desire to really visit all parts of the U.S. from people from around the world, and that they're welcomed here, which they will be. And then from a meeting and event standpoint, how are we as an industry maybe a little bit more unified? Maybe we have a little bit better story that we're telling in a more concise, consistent way. That's hard to measure, but I think there is a sense that that's an opportunity for us. And so I will be very happy if I feel like we're just a little bit further along in being able to convey to those key kind of audiences you talked about earlier, the value of our business, and they're kind of saying, yeah, we get it.
Wonderful. Kevin, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I look forward to seeing you soon in person and to bring even more people to the US.
Sounds great, Eric. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Great conversation and look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business of Meeting podcast. I hope you found today's episode valuable. If you enjoyed the show, the most important thing you can do is leave a review and share it with your colleagues. It really helps spread the word. I truly appreciate your support. And if you're ready to take your business to the next level, don't forget to visit eventbusinessformula.com to learn more about how we are helping even business owners like you. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.